With expert handling, high school dramas comfortably earn their place in the TV canon. It's been 20 years since Buffy, and its central conceit that adolescence is, literally, a horror show, stands up today. Although the teenage experience has shifted to an unfathomable degree since 1997. Similarly, my so-called life and freaks and geeks continue to be relatable. Even though the smartest phone they had to be concerned with was fixed to the kitchen wall. There is a rich seam of action to be found in the melodrama of school corridors. And Netflix's latest, 13 Reasons Why, attempts to portray almost every aspect of it. It's based on a 2007 YA novel by J. Asher, and the central premise is bleak. A 17-year-old girl, Hannah Baker, has killed herself. She leaves behind 13 sides of cassette tape, on which she has narrated the wrongdoings of those around her. Each side concerns the actions of one of her acquaintances. They are supposed to listen, then pass the tapes to the next person in order to learn what they've done, and so that it never has to happen again. Hannah is a martyr of teen angst. We see her tragedy unfold over two timelines, with flashbacks of how it all came to be, and a present-day story in which Clay, supposedly the nerdy, Star Wars-loving kid, with a jaw carved out of stone, attempts to unravel and then avenge the mystery. Rather than listen to the tapes all at once, Clay takes his time over it, confronting those whose secrets are revealed as he discovers their part in it. This works to the benefit of the 13-episode structure, but drags it out for the viewer, in part because it becomes repetitive. There is a grim concoction of misdemeanors, from bullying to voyeurism, sexual assault to a fatal car crash, all against a backdrop of sex, drugs and nostalgic mixtapes. There is plenty to admire, and its aims are undoubtedly ambitious. Dylan Minnette, who plays Clay, handles a tough role with sensitivity and resists the urge to overget Clay's struggle to cope with what has happened is one of the more complex diversions in the story. The portrait of grief that Grey's Anatomy's Kate Walsh conjures up as Hannah's mother is devastating and, at times, hard to watch. While this does not necessarily make it a pleasurable viewing experience, the fact that it's unflinchingly awful, think Lord of the Flies. The secret history and Heathers mixed up in a Californian high school, has some power. It's particularly brave in its depiction of the behavior of young men, both towards girls and with each other. And if its intended audience comes away with the recognition that this is not normal, and does not have to be normal, that can only be a positive. But it's unfortunate that a show so concerned with the catastrophic effects of misogyny doesn't manage to avoid some pitfalls of its own. The decision to depict rape graphically, and not briefly, either, was obviously taken with the intention of insisting we witness its brutality. Personally, I found it to tip towards the gratuitous. Likewise, a storyline that suggests the love of a sweet boy might have sorted all this out added to an uneasy feeling that stayed with me, that this was more about boys than girls, even though the ruined life of a girl is at its center. I wonder about its handling of suicide, which again is depicted graphically. One of the adult characters says there's never really any way of knowing why Hannah did what she did, and I found myself on his side in that, even though I don't think that is what we are being led to feel. It's also one of those Netflix moments where binge-watching is not beneficial. In the end, the cumulative horror of all these woeful scenarios happening to one girl feels overblown if you watch it in bulk. Though I imagine it would have been far more effective in the old way of teasing out the mystery with one installment a week, unlike Stranger Things. Its appeal is likely to be limited to the age group of those whose lives it depicts. I would be surprised if it lands with adults in the way that it is clearly expected to with teenagers, though it is funny at times. Have you ever heard of the male gaze? We're not entirely sure what it means. But we think you have it. It lacks the crossover wit of its forebears, though there are nods to its heritage, with a cameo from Wilson Cruz, My So-Called Life's Ricky, and some shots reminiscent of Heather's. It's too tied up in conveying the message that terrible behavior can have horrible consequences to deal in any subtleties or shades of feeling. It's largely one note, and that note is horrifying. It has to get better, implores one student towards the end, but given its fairly open ending and apparent season 2 setup, it does not seem as if there's much chance of that happening.